Painting is hard, and at the same time, it isn't. Unless you're a stickler for perfection like I am and you keep raising your standards even higher with every mini you paint. But I'm sure at this point a lot of you are aware that I am a very slow painter. Quick TLDR, I've only painted about 11 miniatures this year since my pile of shame video. So I wanted to sit down and try to understand why, so I'm putting fingers to keyboard today to try and do just that. So welcome back everyone, it's me the Warhammer complaining guy, Revan/Handy, destroyer of wallets, make our terrible financial decisions, back with another video, where I, as an unlicensed psychologist, try to understand my unparalleled and autistic intellect when it comes to why I don't paint as much as I probably would like to. After thinking about it for a decent amount of time, I've come up with 5 reasons as to why painting is hard for me. The first is something a lot of us suffer from, which is buying way more shit than we'll ever need or get to in a timely manner. The first point is kinda obvious since that's what I launched my channel on 3 years ago, which is my pile of shame that grows and shrinks slightly with each passing year. Some of us, you know who you are, I'm not the only one here, have way too much shit. And we can probably afford to not spend so much on Warhammer since it's getting more expensive with every passing year. But as I mentioned in my FOMO video that not many people watched, FOMO kind of plays a huge part in this because GW is really good at getting us to want the hot new thing. For those of us that are hardcore Warhammer fans, getting the new hot thing is supposed to save us the headache of having to wait for a solo release, or having to suffer through waiting possibly months for a restock on something that's fairly popular or meta. This feeling of FOMO then compounds over multiple months, and eventually we end up with too many miniatures and not enough time to paint all of them. But I feel like the longer you're in Warhammer, the worse it gets, while at the same time you eventually start to see through GW's bullshit when it comes to releasing miniatures. Although GW has recently been pretty good about making me not want to buy anything besides maybe a novel, or the occasional miniature that I think would look cool sitting on my display shelf waiting to get painted. Also, yeah, GW did a good job at making me not want to get any of the Christmas boxes because I already own Dark Angels and Knights along with there being no Skaven box. For once during the holiday season, my wallet is safe. I'm sure some of you also feel this way, especially the Blood Angels players with how awful some of the new miniatures look, so you would rather not buy anything at all. While yes, having the choice of what to paint is nice, sometimes having too much choice is a bad thing, because then you're not sure what you want to paint or where you should even start painting. Let's be honest, do you really want to sit down and paint 30 plus miniatures on short notice because you aren't sure on what your army's paint scheme will be? And will you also be happy with that paint scheme? Which brings up my next point on why painting minis can be difficult for me, which is deciding on a paint scheme. Now, I'm gonna level with you guys, I honestly had no idea what chapter I was gonna paint my Space Marines as when I first got them. It took me a good 3 months to finally decide they were gonna be Horus Heresy colored Dark Angels. It's also because it's a simple and easy color scheme to paint, black, red, and silver, easy as that. I will admit at one point I was gonna take the easy way out and go with Ultra Smurfs, but I'm glad I didn't. I still do somewhat have this issue even today when it comes to painting some of my Battletech minis, because in Battletech you can pretty much choose whichever colors you want to paint your mechs. I'm using this as a point of difficulty painting minis because choosing how your army or individual mini is going to be painted is a huge leap of faith to take because we may not be sure if we like the colors we chose because we don't want our expensive plastic or resin crack to end up on a Thin Your Paints compilation. So honestly, it's best to just do research on all the armies and experiment painting random bits until you reach the result you're satisfied with. So really, just trust in the process. But then the next issue that reared its ugly head is consistency. And since I'm bringing up consistency, it's time to be consistent with audience interaction to help boost it to the almighty YouTube algorithm. So maybe drop a like and subscribe please, because your support and engagement for this elaborate shitpost of a channel only helps it grow to help reach more Warhammer and Battletech fans. But let me know in the comments down below, what issues do you yourself encounter when you try to hobby? It could either be time constraints, just struggling to pick up the brush, or even something like painter's block, because at some point we all go through the same experiences in a hobby that involves the assembly and painting of miniatures. But for consistency, I often struggle with it because as time has passed and I've become a more experienced painter and I know what I like to look for in a paint brand that isn't our overpriced GW paints, I want to try and remain as consistent as possible with how I paint my miniatures. Aside from myself, I've noticed that as painters, we all like certain paint brands, either because of the color value, its properties, how well it covers after 2 thin coats, the ability to mix it with other colors, does the cost justify its value, and many other reasons I can't think think of that you can probably answer down in the comments section. So the bigger picture of the paint brands we choose is how is this consistent with the paints you've used previously. If you paid attention to the background of my recent videos, you already know I've tried so many gold and silver paints that half my paint rack is just metallic paints. So a lot of the minis I painted over the past year look vastly different from when I first started painting, because I want to find that perfect metallic paint that I would want to stare at when they're sitting on my display shelf, or if I go out to play a game of Warhammer a few times a year. Colors like black, red, and off-whites with the checkers I paint have remained fairly consistent these past few years, although Duncan Rhodes and his Too Thin Coats brand is slowly winning my heart over and replacing a lot of my GW paints I used in previous projects. Now that I think about it, it must really sting for GW right about now that their former employee is becoming more successful in the miniature paint market than they are, because Too Thin Coats is usually always out of stock at my game store. Okay, back to the subject at hand. So the consistency of the minis we paint may vastly change over the years, since we may find a color we like better than we used on previous projects, unless the formulas get changed without GW telling us, because there is the age-old saying of don't fix what isn't broken. Unless you're GW. So there may be some inconsistencies with what's been painted previously, but that's honestly fine, because we all improve as painters with each mini we paint. Because while the pigment in our colors might not remain consistent, the one thing that should remain consistent is the color scheme. But the issue of consistency can drastically change when we run into the next issue that I know I'm gonna have trouble with, and already sort of have, which is the issue of scale. Okay, so this is probably the one a lot of you are wondering why I'm including it, besides needing 5 subtopics for this video. Well, it's because it's relevant to all my large models. But the idea of painting in scale is something a lot of model railroaders are familiar with, because if we want to weather buildings, locomotives, or rolling stock in scale, it just means we want it to look realistic. This is also true for Warhammer or any other miniature war game, so I'm sure a lot of you know about the 3-foot rule, which is if it looks good from 3 feet away, good job. Unfortunately, this doesn't work for large vehicles, knights, and titans, so then the 3-foot rule can then turn into the 10-foot rule. Why? Because knights and titans are fairly large, so 3 feet is enough to clearly see all the fine details on the model. You see, as the model goes up in size, the more time and effort is needed to make sure it looks good, not just up close, but also further away. And these problems even rear their ugly head on something as trivial as a dreadnought. So let me give you an example. First, look at this Space Marine dreadnought from 3 feet away and ask yourself, how much detail can I make out on both models? And you'll probably say, I can make out almost every detail on the dreadnought. Now let me put an exponentially larger model in frame from the same distance, and as you can see, a lot more detail is observed on the knight than the Marine and dreadnought now. This then creates a slew of problems for a model of titanic proportions. So now you hopefully understand the problem of scaling and why some painters may not get to these in a timely manner, because we don't want our several $1,000 investment to turn into one very large and expensive failure. This is why over the past 2 years I've been experimenting with various paints to find the colors I like that I hope would look good on a very large model, which is why on top of me not having a dedicated airbrush station yet due to family reasons, this is the number one reason as to why it's taking me so long to paint my large models, which also segues into my final reason as to why painting is sometimes hard for me personally, which is my painting standards are always going up. Now, everything I mentioned before all culminates into my final point as to why painting stuff may be more difficult for me, and probably you when you really think about it. Because as we get more stuff, it makes it harder to paint everything in a timely manner, because we have to decide on an army paint scheme that we want to be consistent at any scale, which is up to the same painting standards that we currently set for ourselves. Now, as we grow as painters, our standards for how we paint our stuff can change. For example, when I first started painting, my standard was base colors, wash, dry brush, lenses, and it's good. Fast forward to today, and my new standard is base coat, wash, highlight with base coat, thin highlight, maybe an extra thin highlight, and any other effects I can possibly incorporate into the model. Then if I'm working on capes, it's base coat, a wash or thin glaze of a similar colored contrast paint, base coat stipple, primary highlight stipple, secondary highlight stipple, then finally the same glaze but thinner to unify everything, and then you end up with a cape like this. And this new standard could take ages to paint. Case in point, when I painted the lion, he took me almost a month to paint because he was when I really started to take things like edge highlighting and blending colors seriously. So now I use the same methods and standards to paint my current miniatures, which you can see if you compare them side by side. This is because my painting standards have changed over the years. And along the way, I've also experimented with new similar colors to find exactly what I like, since the end product of this experimentation is for my larger models, because they're also going to be using similar colors that might be from different paint brands. But I'm sure a lot of your painting standards have also changed throughout time too, like mine has, and I'm sure you can relate to the struggles of trying to paint all your stuff the way you want it to be, and that's just fine. So get out there and paint some miniatures, because you'll probably finish painting more stuff than I can by the time I make next year's Pile of Shame video. So anyways, if you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. If you want to support the channel, simply hitting the like and subscribe button helps more than you think. And maybe let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on the subject of today's video. If you want to show me some of your cool miniatures, be it Warhammer, Battletech, or any other miniature war game, I do have a Discord. Or if you want to get some live feedback on your miniatures, you can watch me live right here on YouTube and Twitch. I stream 3 to 4 times a week. But if you really want to support the channel, becoming a channel member also helps too, since it allows you to make up bullshit excuses to my parents about why I totally need to get a paint booth so I can finally paint my Warlord Titan. Or just so you can force me to get a miniature I don't want to paint, like Rowboat Gorilla Man. Anyways, I have to go make more terrible financial decisions, so I'll see you all in the next video, and remember, being poor is a choice.